Hey there YouTube, Arbiner69 here. Yep, we have another Oculus Quest 2 video for you today. On the back of the unboxing video that I did, and I'll drop a link to that up here. I've been using this now for a couple of weeks and I thought I would share with you my opinions and my views on the Oculus Quest 2 compared to the old Oculus Quest 1 just over here. So, how does it fare up? Well, let's dive into the on-paper stats and have a look at it. So we can see from the Oculus Quest 1 to the Oculus Quest 2, the CPU has changed. The original Quest 1 was using the Qualcomm Snapdragon 835, and now the Quest 2 is using the Snapdragon XR2. Now the Snapdragon 835 was a mobile processor, whereas the XR2 is a dedicated VR chipset. So looking at the RAM, the Oculus Quest 1 had 4GB, whereas now we're up to 6GB of RAM on the Oculus Quest 2. The storage, the original had 64GB and 128GB. We're now coming in on the Quest 2 with 64 and 256GB. Reason being is I can only surmise that the games are going to get larger. Now one of the biggest changes is the display. If we look at the original, it was a Pentile OLED running at 1440 by 1600 per eye and ran at 72 Hz. Now the Quest 2 is an LCD panel running at 1832 by 1920 at 90 Hz. Now, we're going to talk more about the screen a bit later on in the video. However, the increased resolution is a bonus and the 90 Hz is definitely a very nice improvement. And the last but not least, coming in at the weight, the original weighed in at 571 grams, the new one weighs in at 503 grams. So that's a quick rundown of the comparison between the Quest 1 and Quest 2 on paper specifications. So what do some of these specs mean? Well, simply put, the Oculus Quest 2 now supports Wi-Fi 6. If you're lucky enough to have a Wi-Fi 6 enabled router, you can now take benefit of that. It also supports the 802.11 AY wireless standard. So the XR2 supports a maximum of up to 7 concurrent cameras. The Oculus Quest only uses 4 cameras at the moment. There is a custom computer vision processor, which provides more accurate tracking with low latency. We also get a slew of new features on the XR2 processor. Those include foveated rendering with eye tracking and variable rate shading for smoother refresh rates. While the Oculus Quest 2 doesn't take advantage of all the features on the XR2 processor, it does leave a lot of room for scope for improvement and possible firmware/software updates down the line that the Oculus Quest 2 may take advantage of some of these features. One thing the Oculus Quest 2 does take advantage of is the low latency tracking that the XR2 provides. It gives us better, more accurate tracking and also better hand tracking as well. So with all that on paper statistics out of the way, these are my views on what I think of the Oculus Quest 2 after using it for a couple of weeks. So the first point is the weight. Now with the Oculus Quest 2 being lighter, it's not so much noticeable in the hand, but when wearing it for any length of time, you do notice the difference in weight. The Quest 2 doesn't press on the face as much as the original first one does. However, talking about wearing it, that leads me onto the head strap, and that is one of my points that I don't like about the Quest 2. Now, the Quest 2 has this all-material head strap. Some people find it fine. I don't. I've got large ears, and unfortunately, with the size of my radars on the side of my head, this strap cuts into the top of it. So as you can see with me wearing the Oculus Quest, it is resting on the top of my ears. The way I've found around this, and it's sort of comfortable but not ideal, is to wear the head strap on top of my ears. Now while that's not the supposedly designed way you're supposed to wear the Oculus Quest 2 head strap, it's the only way that I've found it comfortable with this material head strap. And in my opinion, the original strap on the Quest 1 that was a harder material and cupped the back of your head much better, that was a far better design. Now I'm presuming they put the material on here to cut costs. Now the image on the Quest 2 is much sharper and cleaner than the original Quest 1. I did notice when using the Quest 2, the screen door effect is muchly reduced. It wasn't bad on the Quest 1 by all means, but on the Quest 2 it is far, far better. Now running at 90 Hz in the home instance, when enabled, it is buttery smooth. While this feature hasn't been fully unlocked for everything, in the home instance when I'm using it, I do notice a difference. Now not all people can tell the difference. Some people don't see a difference at all. Going from say 100 Hz down to 90 Hz, there isn't a massive difference, but going from the original 72 Hz from the Quest 1 to the 90 on the Quest 2, there is a slight difference. It is slightly noticeable. Now with software updates, we've been told that the 90 Hz will be fully unlocked across the Quest 2 for the developers to take advantage of that during games, but at the moment it is supposed to be limited to the home screen only. So talking about a screen on the Quest 2, they've opted to go with an LCD as opposed to the OLED, and therein I find one of the biggest problems. The blacks aren't as nice. Now the Quest 1, the blacks were very, very rich, whereas in the Quest 2, when I'm looking at it, it's quite grey. Now there are conversations on the internet where people say it's not that noticeable. I myself do notice a difference, and it can get annoying at times. Now I'm assuming the reason they went with an LCD as opposed to an OLED screen in the Quest 2 is again to reduce costs, because we are talking about a very, very powerful Quest 2 headset, a VR headset. It's completely standalone, completely wireless, and it is phenomenally cheap for what it is. OLED screens are slightly more expensive than LCD screens, so I'm presuming that's where the trade-off came in the design. Now the other issue that I have noticed on the screen is, I don't know if it's the LCD, if it's my eyes or what, but when you're looking at white text on a black background, they seem to have a halo effect, sort of like a ghosting around the text. It's more noticeable on the Quest 2 than it is on the Quest 1. It is there on the Quest 1, but the Quest 2 is far more pronounced. And again, I assume that is due to the LCD screen. Now, we're going to have a look at the comparison between the Quest 1 and the Quest 2 screens. I did try to take some screenshots in the headsets themselves, but because it's taken within the headset, it's not a true representation of what the actual panel puts out to the eye. So for both of these, I've used a digital camera, photographed through the lens, roughly the same scene, trying to line them up as best I can, and the camera settings are all identical on both of these. So this first comparison is the home instance, looking at the Quest 1 side by side with the Quest 2. Now straight off the bat you can see that the Quest 2 is a lot lighter and the colours aren't as rich. The other thing to note that I can tell is looking at the chair, the fridge, the cupboards in the background, everything just seems that much crisper, more defined and a lot sharper than the original Quest 1. Now the photographs don't do it justice because it is quite hard to take a photograph through a lens of a headset, but when you are wearing the Quest 2 the picture is very, very sharp compared to the Quest 1. Now we'll look at the next one. This is Skybox Home Cinema. Now what I've done here is I've turned the lighting, the ambient lighting up to level 4 on both of these and taken the screenshot through the lens again. Now as we can see, it looks a lot richer on the Quest 1 than it does on the Quest 2. The Quest 2 looks a bit more washed out and greyer. It's definitely noticeable on the backs of the chairs. They are a lot paler than they are on the Quest 1. However, if you look at the panelling on the back, you can see the detail and the fine lines are much, much crisper on the Quest 2. Also looking at the arms of the chairs, it seems to be more detail is picked out on the Quest 2 than there is on the Quest 1. And then lastly, this is the same scene again, but with the ambient lighting turned down to level 1 in the headset. Now while there's not a great deal of detail to see here, the reason I did this was purely to show and try and represent how the blacks look in the Quest 2 versus the Quest 1. You can see in the Quest 1, the OLED panel does a fantastic job of black representation, whereas the Quest 2, it's a lot greyer. It's not a true black, and that is down to the LCD panel. So it was a quick demonstration and the best representation I could think of to show you the differences between the screen on the Quest 1 and the Quest 2. Now we'll take a quick look at the sound. Now, to be honest, I'm no audiophile on this, and to me, I couldn't tell much of a difference between the sound quality of the Quest 1 versus the Quest 2. They're both decent speakers. They're not groundbreaking, they're not magnificent, they're not fantastic, and a good set of headphones will beat them hands down anytime. However, for a totally wireless, all-in-one headset, they do a fairly good job of representation of the sound and directional sound. So moving on to tracking, as I said before, the XR2 provides much, much better and more accurate tracking, and to be honest, I did notice a slight improvement when using the Quest 2. Fast movements are tracked absolutely beautiful. Playing things like Beat Saber, fast-paced games, it is absolutely astonishing. The hand tracking seems a lot more accurate when using your hands. Bringing hands over to each other, it still gets the illusion you still get the hands disappearing, but I was able to bring my hands closer together and touch before the hands actually disappeared within the headset itself. So the XR2 chipset seems to do a phenomenal job in the hand tracking and controller tracking at the moment. And talking about the controllers, these Oculus Quest 2 controllers have been slightly redesigned, as I said in my previous video. They're slightly larger in the actual button and joystick area with a nice thumb rest. They just feel more ergonomic and all round just better to hold in your hand, to be honest with you. I'm still using the original batteries in mine. I haven't had any problems, and these are just very, very nice controllers. So they're my opinions of the Oculus Quest 2 versus the Quest 1. Is it worth it? In my opinion, yes, the Quest 2 is an improvement over the first one. Not only for the on-paper specifications, but when using it overall as an all-round experience, it is better than the Quest 1. Now, like I said, The screen door effect is reduced in the Quest 2. That adds to immersion much better. I did mention that the blacks aren't as deep as the Quest 1, and while yes, in some instances that does detract, on the whole, when playing most of the games that I've played on the Quest 2, it hasn't been an issue and it has just disappeared into the background and not even been anything that's occurred to me while playing games. And the last thing is, when 90Hz is fully unlocked on the Quest 2, this will be an absolute killer update for the Quest 2. Games, everything will just run a lot smoother across the board, and it'll be a much more immersive, less jarring experience. Not to say that 72Hz isn't bad, it works, but the smoother the refresh rate, the better the experience is in my opinion. So that is a few opinions of mine of the Quest 2 versus the Quest 1 after a couple of weeks of usage. So if you found the video useful or anything like that, please smack the thumbs up or the thumbs down button, but please leave me a comment and ask me any questions you have about the Oculus Quest 2 and I'll do my best to answer them. And if you can subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, it helps me out immensely. Until next time, happy questing.